Thursday.
Hello.
You're still there. Your internet is still there. The storm graced by you and hit our friends in Florida. How you doing?
Yeah. I got a glancing blow. Milton was coming straight for us, and then at the last minute he was like, "No, actually, Florida looks like a more tasty morsel."
Florida looks good.
Went in the other direction. So we got a lot of rain, lost power for 17-ish hours, but we're here, dried out finally,
a lot of hours.
Looking good. Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, no, it's good. I had a hurricane plan in place. I had after Beryl, I in a non-emergency situation, sat down and said, what should I do in what order, when the next one's coming. I had it all lined up. So I just went through the checklist, man. No problems. Had everything ready to go. It was awesome.
You get only old-timey hurricane names. If this is some shit that was named in the early 1900s, then it's coming for you. Beryl, Milton. Hurricane Edith is heading your way next year, I think. Yeah. Casey,
that's very
you're
true.
here.
Very true.
No hurricanes where you live.
I'm here.
You are hurricane-free out there.
No, I sometimes wish we had an odd thunderstorm here. It's very strange.
Didn't you get that one time?
Talking to me.
Didn't that one?
It feels like we're talking on the radio or something.
Last year, didn't that one hurricane hook and come across?
Yeah, we get the odd winter storm. I don't really.
Or it came across. Did it cross Mexico and then go up? Something happened last year. I remember some sort of West Coast hurricane situation last year. Am I totally out of my mind? Did I make this up?
No, you're not. I remember it. But
we typically get six or so big winter storms, which sometimes involve some snow and maybe some localized flooding. But no, nothing quite as exciting as what's going on in the Gulf every other day these days. It's you've got a Starlink launch and then a hurricane and then a Starlink launch on alternate days.
That is the pattern. Yeah.
Yes, that's bang on. Yeah.
This is one of those shows where we have about 8,000 topics, and you came up last week on the show with the SLS writing. There was a little bit of the good old blog off between it was you, Eric Berger, and Dr. Z, I think, was in on the Slag on SLS writing crew. Which is good.
Normally I write blogs in one sitting, but that one I took a few days on, and it was every day someone else leaped up to the breach to drop their own poster to go back and revise and fix things, and it was, I think, for the best overall. It's best to have the last word, but yeah, obviously this is a salient topic. It's on a lot of people's mind.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a thing, and I think, to me, it feels like you three coordinated. So I think there's some sort of political motive here. You're all being paid by the same organization.
Oh yes. Oh yeah. Look at the quality of what you. They're clearly not paying me very much.
Hurricane Hillary. I'm getting confirmation in the chat, by the way, that Hurricane Hillary crossed over and hit LA. So I'm not making it up. Yeah. There we go.
No, Did we ever suggest you were making it up? Just that we're clueless.
Felt like
I'm currently in my works building here, and the roof leaks in new and exciting ways in winter. But that's kind of part of the fun. It's almost a novelty because it only rains about 10 times a year here.
Not a lot
extra
of iterations to test out where things are. That's why the Teslas back in the day, was it the trunk that it collected water, and then you would open the trunk and it would all dump right into your actual trunk. There was no weather sealing or something. I don't know. I'll have to look up. Yeah.
There was. It was just a little optimistic, I think. It wasn't quite as well developed as perhaps it should have been.
East Coast rain.
Yeah.
Jake, did you, even though your power's out, did you maintain a drink supply in your house?
I did, yeah. I again, part of the hurricane plan a few days before, get any supplies you need, including alcohol. Because in Yucatan, whenever anything bad happens, they just say, you know what, we got to stop selling alcohol. It's like their Band-Aid solution for every problem. It's just ban alcohol for 24 hours and the problems will go away. Yeah. So I stocked up. I got some wine though. So I've been getting more wine lately. So this is Spanish. It's a Macabeo. So, I don't know. I don't really know much about wine, so I just got it because it was there and whatever. But I need the bottles because I've been making mead and I need to bottle it. So I'm like, well, I may as well just get the bottles with wine in it.
Jesus Christ.
Feels like a good
Tell me you have a drinking problem without telling me you have a drinking problem. I needed bottles to make mead, so I bought more wine to drink. So
yeah. You buy the wine, drink the wine, make the mead, put it back in the bottle, and then the process repeats, right?
That's
got to build up a little bit of an inventory here, So anyway,
God, I love that.
So cheers.
I love it.
Yeah.
Look at that. That's fancy as hell. Casey, what you got? A little earlier out your way.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Well, I personally don't drink alcohol, but that's lucky because I opened the tap just before and I got some rocket fuel. So it turns out
product marketing.
You can go. This stuff exists apparently on the south pole of the moon, and if you go there, it's rocket fuel. That's what I keep hearing from Lockheed and from ULA and from Paul Sputus when he was still with us, and other people who should frankly know better.
Wow.
But actually, we're in the business here of turning this into actual rocket fuel. It does involve 40 to 60 kilowatt hours per kilogram or something. It's quite a lot of energy, but this
eventually,
is
it is rocket fuel.
Some millions of molecules in here went through a space shuttle engine at one point.
That's the solace you take when drinking water. I love it. Jake, you're you're the only alcoholic on the show today because I'm drinking this.
All right.
I was out at, first of all, I'm dragging today between 1 month old and also the Phillies just sucked and it was very disappointing yesterday. But they were giving out these La Colombe mochas at like a farmer's market over the weekend, and we kept going back to the stand because they're freaking delicious. So that's what I got.
We have caffeine.
Yep.
We have caffeine, alcohol, and municipal allegedly contamination-free water. This is like the three horsemen of post 1600s.
That's the Triforce. The
culture.
Triforce right there.
Yeah. We're going to
now we'll solve it all
over again.
Where should we start? Jake? You feel like you wrote the original topic list down. So
yeah. Well, okay. So
problem.
I mean, I think what I really, really want to get out of our time with Casey today is we got to crack open Mars sample return. I think that's got to be the biggest one that is like this G to talk about and meets all of our interests and that kind of thing. So maybe we'll start there. And I just kind of, but I don't know how to kick that off though. So you have written a lot about this, Casey, whether on your blog or in our Discord. So I would love to hear.
Yes.
I don't know. Where do we start with that? I guess we have some commercial studies ongoing, but what do you make of this the current state of this program? Lobbyist softball.
Yeah. It seems to me that like 98% of the stuff that I write on the Discord is just me like going off on Mars sample return for like 3 or 4 hours at a time until people are like, "Can you stop?" And part of the reason for that is that I never worked on it at JPL, but I knew quite a few people who were working on it and or had worked on it in the past. And I'm not young anymore. I've got children and I'm in my late 30s. And I remember some of the first books I ever cracked open on space, which were not new books at the time, talked about Mars sample return, right? So this is some researcher who's gone and talked to a bunch of nerds at JPL back in 1978, let's say, back when Carl Sagan was like younger than I am now. And they were talking about Mars sample return back then. And so it kind of blows my mind that when the money tap finally got turned on a few years ago, they kind of dusted off some architectural study and hodgepodged a few helicopters and stuff into it, and then sat back scratching their head as the mass budget kind of didn't miss by a small amount, and the schedule kind of took off, and then acted surprised that it didn't work. And it kind of blows my mind because you think like, well, if this is on the horizon, we've been thinking about it for 30, 40, 50 years, you'd think you'd be ready, right? You'd think you'd be like, okay, this is it. We better not screw it up. Luckily, we've already done all the math. But then like the independent review board is like, oh yeah, it turns out they forgot the mass of the landing legs. You're like, that could be important. Or we could just delete them. I mean, do we actually need landing legs? I don't know.
Let's make it a helicopter.
I don't know.
The whole thing's a helicopter. It comes in, aeroshell, you shut it, the rotors flick out, and the whole thing.
Not everything is going to be Dragonfly, man. You got to.
Yeah.
I like helicopters a lot. I think helicopters are cool. I mean, the thing that bothers me about Mars sample return most of all is that it seems fairly clear to me that it is extremely difficult to do Mars sample return with our existing Mars EDL, like entry, descent, landing stack, right? So you can get a ton or two down onto the surface with something like the Curiosity backshell, but like Curiosity landing system. But like doing mass sample return within that envelope is really hard. So instead of recognizing that and then saying, well, this is true, and also it is the case that we want to do humans someday, and we obviously cannot do humans within that envelope. So let's instead of let's put $1 billion into figuring out how to, upscale this by a factor of 10. And yes, it'll take a few years, but we have to do it sooner or later anyway. We instead are treated to this insane spectacle of like trying to pack, the proverbial 20 pounds into the 10-pound bag with this existing technology because it's safe and de-risked, even though it just ends up costing 10 times as much and also removes success from the set of possible outcomes. It seems insane to me. Like, okay, I'm just some guy on the internet with an opinion, but like, how did no one involved in this say, this is not closing, and every time we take a closer look at it, it's getting worse and worse and worse. Probably we should back off a bit before we go and build like the mass sample return equivalent of the space shuttle, and then sit back and wonder why it didn't work properly. And of course, it eventually became impossible to hide that. It became impossible to disguise the fact that this project was going off the rails, and kind of several half-hearted efforts were made to put it back on track. But really, all they did was add process, and they didn't actually get to the core problem. And I think the IRB report pointed that out. Casey Dreyer got in there with a nice interview with him on Planetary Radio, and like he said the quiet part out loud, which is like we had more people who were working on like interagency coordination than we had people who were actually trying to close the mass study. That's a problem.
Yeah. I mean, this one, the thing that's like really starting to surface for me on this problem is that it is not clear to me that NASA made a decision or understood where they wanted to have a decision made about who's in charge of it. Like, is Mars sample return scoped to like one center, or is it scoped to like a directorate, or is it scoped to the entire agency, or is it scoped to like the national interest of the United States, right? Like, and depending on where you kind of like put the priority in that stack, you get a different outcome, right? And I think the outcome you're describing, which is like, why don't we think of our entire space agency holistically and understand the relationship between what we're going to do with MSR as a robotic mission to a future human mission? That's like a very NASA or interest level decision. And I think what ended up happening is it got like shoved in between the cracks of like somewhere between a center level and HQ level with like this really like amorphous leadership structure. Like there was no one in charge of this is what it kind of felt like to me, and no one was able to like make that kind of clairvoyant decision, right?
Yeah, there's some stuff going on in the background, which is there's kind of these different things pulling in different directions. So you have in order to try and make it harder to cancel, you bring the Europeans on board. Okay, well, that's great, and we like to have them, but at the same time, like the European space program has not exactly been like hitting home runs for quite a while now, and there's some good reasons for that. But it turns out that they have many of the same organizational problems that NASA has, only turned up to 11. And then of course there's like
it's countries, not just senators and senators. Yeah, it's like
yeah. So you have the constant infighting between the different NASA centers, right? So like JPL on the East Coast, JPL is seen as like the fair-headed child that can do no wrong.
No, baby, we got APL out here. We got the hot shot out here.
Yeah,
we're all APL
out there because they're local. Like there's a lot of arguments going on there, and like sample return is seen as much too big a project for just one center to do, especially as JPL is kind of in the process of doing Psyche and Europa Clipper and Perseverance as well at the same time. Even though all the expertise is to do it there, and of course at some point if we switch to human Mars exploration, probably Johnson will like end up taking Mars exploration from JPL, and like JPL will get a constellation prize of like, oh, you get to like send a Cassini like orbiter to some icy moon every 20 years or so. But like this is such a zero-sum miserable kind of vision of the future, right? And I've written a lot of blogs about this, basically saying like given that the launch constraint has basically gone away, JPL should be reconfigured around just like mass production of orbiters and landers for all these different things. And I say, well, what would the cost of a program where we just send like one Falcon Heavy to every planet, every launch window, whatever you've got like on it or not? And I think that would help kind of undermine the zero sum or even negative sum bickering between the centers, because everyone would have a chance to get some, right? Everyone would get a go. It wouldn't be the case that you wait until you're like on death's door to get your chance to fly your mission, and then like that's it. You're not going to live to see another one, which is kind of the situation we're in. And anyway, so the upshot from this, I mean, kind of reading between the lines a little bit, but I read the independent review board report as well, which of course is a reflection of reality, not necessarily a copy of a perfect match to reality. Is that in order to improve the chance of program success, they took the program out of JPL, who was working it, and sort of gave it to HQ and a few other centers to do bits and pieces of it, leaving JPL actually only a relatively small part overall of the project. And then acted surprised that all these other centers didn't really have the standing army of talent ready to go on these incredibly complicated things that are next to impossible to do. And I think I'm putting my spicy hat on today, but one of the kind of shibboleths or articles of faith that seems to exist within NASA is that it's possible to be a really exceptional technical leader on technical programs without actually being all that technical, or at least not being recently technical. And so you've got a lot of program managers and so on at NASA have been promoted maybe from the technical staff originally, but they're not really up to date on what can be done. And yet they're expected to make a decision on the basis of a 200 slide PowerPoint that a series of interns put together or a series of other people put together. And you end up with these situations like we just saw in the news a couple of weeks ago, where Europa Clipper is closed out and ready to launch, and they're like, oh yeah, by the way, there's MOSFETs that are radiation sensitive. Yeah, we never actually dispositioned that problem. We just kind of put together a 100-page PowerPoint and then decided it was too hard and kicked it to the next design review 2 years later to figure out. And now they're like, yeah, we think we can anneal it, on the backside of the orbit. Well, damn, we'll hope so. I guess we'll find out. The time to solve that problem was 15 years ago, not like, oh shit, it's already shipped.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just
one of the things
super
that
frustrating.
you got on about though was that you kind of up front argued for a capabilities-driven approach, which I actually kind of buy in this case, where you're saying, we've hit the upper limit on what we can do in our current model. Go back to Jake's old We Martians podcast about the 70-degree sphere cone or whatever that whole episode is about. And if you were at that point, we're looking at it as like an investor of like, all right, let me solve the next biggest thing in front of me. It would be, let's just add another zero to what we can land on Mars. And then once we solve that problem, we will figure out what's next. That is actually kind of where they're getting to with the whole kick this to commercial and other organizations and get some studies back on how we would do this problem, or how we could do this differently. Most of those are going to be like a totally different way of landing something on Mars than the typical approach has been of landing things on Mars. It'll be either we're going to land it with Starship. Who the hell knows what Rocket Lab is going to propose? Blue Origin's like, we're going to do a version of our Blue Moon lander. They're all giant landers that can land way more mass on the surface and then figure something out from there. And so I guess it will be interesting to see if that is really like the next biggest problem to solve. I'm not sure any of us would be cranky if that was the actual statement at the end of this whole process, was like, we're actually going to take the next 7 years to figure out how to land way more mass on Mars. And in 5 years, based on where we've gotten, we will come back with a new architecture on how to launch things off the surface and what the best way would be to get this samples back. But like, we're going all in on landing bigger stuff on Mars first. And because we can't, we literally can't do that. And the problem with the capabilities approach with like the SLS Orion path was that was a bunch of shit that we know how to do already. That was a bunch of things that we had architectures for that worked. We can launch spacecraft into orbit. We can link up with a different thing in orbit and boost it to the moon. We've got that architecture figured out, but we have never landed, more than a ton on the surface of Mars. So there are instances when expanding your capability envelope actually makes a lot of sense. And if this was the flagship program to do that, how much better of a spot are we in than doing that and a whole bunch of other programmatic shit for the next 5 years?
Yeah, I agree. I think that if you look retrospectively at the space station, we spent 30 years building this thing because we decided that like the purpose of the space shuttle in life was to build a space station. And you say, what do we get for it? Like 400 something cubic meters of pressurized volume. Like right off the top,
nice window.
Like, we know now that like the cost of the cost of developing Starship, which has all these additional capabilities on top of that, will probably be like around about 1% of the entire cost of the space station. And the Starship itself, if you refinished the interior and made it a pressurizable volume, like similar to Skylab in conception, would be about twice the interior volume of the entire International Space Station. And that's not including the propellant tanks, which you could presumably pressurize and use as well. And obviously there's like some engineering to be done there. It's not like, oh, we'll just take an old Starship off the line down at Boca Chica and it's good to go. But just like because we didn't want to spend $5 billion or $10 billion building a heavy lift launch vehicle that could actually launch like a module larger than a medium-sized school bus. We instead spent 30 years and $400 billion launching it in like sausage fashion, and now we have this giant, wobbly spacecraft in low Earth orbit that was basically obsolete and breaking down before it was even completed. And the answer to this is like not, oh crap, we've made a horrible decision. How did this decision occur? We should probably never make this decision again. It's like, well, we're going to deorbit the space station in 2030, but don't worry, by then we'll have built another space station with all the same architectural mistakes in lunar orbit, like locking us into another decade or 2 decades or 3 decades of like chasing our own tail. This is insane. Why are we doing this? I think one of the reasons that kind of kicking Mars sample return out to the private sector is advantageous is because it means like we have no idea how to make this succeed within the bounds of what is, within NASA's Overton window. And I saw Rocket Lab got the thumbs up recently to do a study on that, which is great. Although I think their architecture is to like we'll have the Earth, we'll have the Mars ascent vehicle and then the Earth return vehicle. So you still got to do this kind of autonomous in orbit docking, which is like hard but not that hard. But you have to say like, if you had the ability to land 10 tons or 50 tons or 100 tons on Mars' surface, which is what Starship's all about, and Elon says a lot of things, but they're saying we should probably have a Starship landed on Mars by 2028 or 2030 at the latest. You can literally put like some giant caster solid 2-stage solid rocket booster, like I don't know, like the Minotaur, like a cut down version of the Minotaur, in the payload fairing, and that's your Earth return vehicle, right? Like you don't have to do any kind of docking, you don't have to do anything. You're literally just buying parts off the shelf and like bolting them together.
I think we joked when this was out. Somebody posted a clip of our show that we said, put the entire Electron launch facility in Starship, land Starship, launch Electron. That was our plan, and we'll see. We'll see what the lander and MAV is for the Rocket Lab proposal. It's not out of the question. We haven't. That ship has not sailed yet, Jake. You might still be accurate.
I think solids might be easier than liquids. Liquids in that
you would
case.
think. You would think. And then
Mahi Peninsula is
who needs
rather
the
nicer than the surface of Mars. Who needs the nozzle? Well, I guess you saw Joe Barnard's fabulous video on that the other day.
Oh my God, we need to shout that out right now, Joe. It's just an absolutely incredible piece of work. We will link to this in the show notes of him. You go into this, you click on it, and you think this is just like a couple of minutes of horseshit from Joe, but then it is like an incredible video that really gets into some solid rocket booster science and just absolutely fabulous. Better content than we will ever make, Jake.
That's for sure.
This is my theory. Joe Barnard for NASA administrator. Can we hyperstition this into heaven? Like,
what were we trying to make him? Were we trying to make him admin last week? No, we were trying to make him the head of the FAA last week, right?
Yeah.
Why not both?
I'll do both. We can do both.
Why don't we merge FAA and the NASA and FAA and NASA?
That'll go over well right now.
Let's make NASA a regulatory agency. That'll be great.
You sound like you're running the government efficiency department or whatever.
Yeah. Department of Government Efficiency. I mean, it's a bit of a challenge, and it's something that I've come up against as well. And, in my day job here, and the people who work in the government, they're good people and they're trying to do their job as well as they can. I've always believed that you should judge the success of a program not by the intentions, but by the outcomes of that program, right? Because at the end of the day, it's not that hard to get a bunch of well-intentioned people together in a room, but it is damn hard to get even talented, well-intentioned people together and actually produce something with value. And it kind of blows my mind that, here at my company, I pay, payroll tax, and then all my employees, they pay income tax. And every time I buy something, I pay tax on that. And all in all, it's, between 30 and 50% of the cash flow through my business goes straight back to the government. And then when I say, hey, just to pick one example, California has basically a typographical error in one of the regulations that means that the synthetic natural gas that we're producing, which is carbon neutral, doesn't count as renewable natural gas because their definition of renewable natural gas is only biogas. And this is a typographical error, literally their admission. It will take 5 years. 5 years, that is like 1,700 days to fix that typographical error, without which we cannot access a certain market. This seems insane. Like my entire business
that whole time, you said
days.
typographic. The first thing I thought you said topographic error, like there was an error in the maps and you couldn't do something, and then I realized you're saying typographic, which makes this story way worse. And
I'm a foreigner. I'm sorry.
5 years. You're saying from like, okay, we've received this feedback, we've turned it around, we've enabled this thing, and it is now officially published, and you can take action on that. Have you
Yeah,
tried
so like
loudly
when I use
tweeting about
Google,
this?
right?
I don't know.
Oh,
Yeah.
constantly. But when I use Google, right? Let's say Google like Gmail has a bug or something, right? Like I'm relatively confident that if Gmail has a bug, someone will be woken up out of bed and be pushing like a pull request to fix that bug like as fast as humanly possible. And every now and then, like Facebook will go down for 6 hours because they accidentally lock themselves out of the data center, and that's pretty funny. But like it's extremely unusual that you even notice, right? It's just automatic regression testing. And yet, when it comes to like fixing a regression in a regulation that is, by the admission of everyone involved, not even capturing the intent of the regulator, 5 years. Like, I'm not even planning to live that long, right? Like, 5 years is a serious chunk of my remaining lifespan. Like, this is crazy. Anyway,
Just at a
I don't
tactical
want to
level.
complain
That's
all
how
day.
you plan. You sound like you plan like NASA budgets. 5 years, whatever. It'll roll off by then. No big deal. Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, like,
Yeah.
if you are trying to solve an important, difficult problem for humanity, whether that's landing mass on Mars or energy problems or whatever, and solving that requires like sequentially fixing five major problems, or like five major problems, which are nonetheless like literally just fixing a typographical error type situation, and you have to do them sequentially, you're out of time. You're dead. Like you have died of old age. So this is why we can't have nice things. All right. Let's go back to space because I feel like there's more stuff to kick here.
Okay, well, so let me take that and run with it for a little bit and go on to kind of a broader thing, because like, so there are like inefficiencies in government, and then there are inefficiencies in government, right? So like there are certain amounts that will just always be there. Like the nature of a democracy just means there is a floor to like, how bad it's going to be. And unless you go and like, rewrite the Constitution, you're not going to get anywhere fixing those. And then there are stuff beyond that can be fixed, right? So there's like there's some sort of place where you can get it to, right? So I guess, if we think about that, where do you think NASA should be? What should be their role inside of that window of how much inefficiency they're just kind of stuck with by nature of being the government? Like what programs should they be doing within that window? Because obviously what they're doing right now is causing some issues, right? We're seeing with MSR, we're seeing with Artemis, all that kind of stuff, right? I kind of want to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Well, that's an important question, and I think it's important to recognize, as you said, that like the government is a very, very large organization composed of people who largely don't know each other, kind of performing bureaucratic operations necessarily. They're just solving hard problems, right? And those problems are difficult and messy and expensive. In the context of NASA, I think it is reasonable for us to look at some of the best run programs and best run projects and say, if you can do it this way once, why can't you do it this way in general, right? And so. Like to look at COTS, for example, like COTS, I think is regarded as a very successful program. There's actually 2 contractors who managed to deliver there, one of them extraordinarily well and led to a bunch of follow-on stuff. And then we should ask, given that's the case, why did Commercial Crew go really badly for Boeing, and why has CLIPS been probably a net negative overall, right, for the entire industry? Like we should probably understand that. And then looking more broadly at like the more conventionally sourced projects like SLS, Orion, Gateway, Space Station Shuttle Program, and so on. Like, why are these projects like not just a little bit worse, but like 100 times worse? Like you're spending 100 times the money and they're going 10 times slower. Like there's an obvious problem there. There's like quite clearly something's gone horribly wrong. And I don't think it's the case that like NASA has to solve a problem. Like I don't know, Social Security Administration has to solve a problem. Like there's a really nasty problem to solve there. NASA's problems are much more discrete. They're much more soluble in technology and effort and so on.
And we have a little bit of agency in picking what problems they are solving, which is another, like some of their problems I think are like the individual programs are run poorly in certain ways, and that's something you can criticize, but you can also criticize the prioritization of the organization overall, and which they're trying to do everything all at once. When, if it were you and I, and you were looking at it, like even saying, I had to fix 5 things sequentially. This is the thing I should not spend my time on. I should go spend my time on something that doesn't require that. Those decisions don't seem like they can be made at a higher level within NASA.
Well, I certainly think that I think like the importance of really strong leadership is undervalued quite clearly at NASA. And there are some extraordinary leaders there, but if you look at the sort of people who end up running these programs in general, they're well-meaning and professional, but let's say like the really ambitious, competent people, they get headhunted out of NASA, right? Because they can get paid twice as much, and they go and work at SpaceX or Blue Origin or Rocket Lab, whatever. Sometimes they come back, sometimes they don't. If you talk to people like Gerst or Dr. Z or whatever, like, why are they not running the show? Well, this or Kathy leaders, like, why are they not running the show? There you go. You kind of understand. And so the sort of people who are left over are the people who have never been recruited by Blue Origin. And maybe that's an unfair criticism, but like,
or founded their own thing,
certainly
right?
The case.
Went off and had their own ideas.
Well, sure, but like, I mean, by their own admission, NASA is having problems with talent retention, right? Talent acquisition and talent retention. And you say, well, why is that the case? Why is it the case that NASA, a place with an incredible brand that like every nerd on earth wants to work at sooner or later, myself included? I spent years getting a green card just so I could work there. And then once I got there, like, why did I decide not to stay there for the rest of my life? Me personally and the people I knew. And it's kind of catastrophic in a way, but I knew hundreds of people at JPL and kind of the people in my general, stage of life or career stage. Probably more than half of them have since left. Like, I left, but also like a lot of the other ones left. Why is that? Well, you say, what's the deal? The deal is you go and get to work on spacecraft. That's cool. That's what I've always wanted to do. Do I actually get to go and like turn bolts and design things? No, most of the time you have to beg for money. Yeah. Okay, like you're salaried, but you still spend all your time begging for money. You don't spend your time actually building spacecraft. You're spending 90+% of your time begging for money. Maybe that's why these projects cost 10 times too much. And what about the rest of the time? Well, do you get paid decent money? No, actually, you get paid twice as much if you've got the same skill level, even in an entry-level job at like Apple or something. You won't be working on spacecraft properly, but you make much more money. Is it necessary to make money? Yes, you want to live in Los Angeles. If you aren't able to make that sort of money, you live an hour and a half commute away, and you can't afford a house and you can't afford children, which is a problem. And then you sort of point this out to your bosses or your managers, and you say, hey, like, last year I managed to deliver this program 6 months ahead of schedule. And do you think I could get a pay rise that reflects the fact that I've delivered enormous value to this program? And they say, no, sorry, we're limited this year, as we are every year, and you get the standard 0.5% pay rise. You say, well, cost of living has increased 8% in Los Angeles in the last in the last 1 year. So that's actually a 7.5% paid decrement. And they're like, well, I'm sorry you feel that way, but I guess we're okay because we moved here in 1972 and we owned 4 houses in La Cañada, which actually, by the way, your colleagues
is getting increasingly specific.
Like
every second this goes on.
And it's like, it's great, but I'm not even done yet.
Can't tell you what the supplier is, Jake, but if you take a right out of Kennedy Space Center, you go past their facility.
Yeah. So not only are they, yeah. So
certain university that ends with Altec.
So not only, well, I'm talking about JPL specifically. So
oh, shocker, weird.
JPL's actually in some ways in a better. It's not a secret that I work there. No, in some ways JPL is not as bad.
No, nor is it who your manager was. If I can just do some public document search.
Yeah, but like they can actually. So FFIDC does have a little bit more freedom in pay scale, but like even then, you can't earn enough money to live in Los Angeles. You will not be promoted until you've been there for 10 or 15 years. Like the people above you have literally died because they will not retire. And by the way, you also have to spend a lot of your time dealing with bureaucratic inefficiency caused by the fact that the organization is literally clogged. Even JPL is clogged with people who will not do their jobs and will not resign and will not be fired. Right. Yeah. And you think I'm speaking hyperbolically here, but like in private industry, if you fill your organization with 95% bozos and you don't have the ability to deliver your products on time and on budget, your business will go out of business straight away. And the creative destruction of capitalism will recycle these elements into something more productive. But at NASA, that never happens. Right. They just print more money and the schedule moves to the right and the budget just climbs to infinity. And you say, why is this okay? So what a great deal. I get to go and work at NASA, and my managers have pretty markedly little interest in what I'm doing. Oh, and by the way, when I pointed out that like me personally saved a bunch of time on a project, I actually got in trouble for that for a variety of reasons. So not only are you not measuring or rewarding productivity, you're actually punishing it. And then you ask, like, why is it the case that these people have difficulty retaining talent?
Yeah.
Like, solve for the equilibrium. Over time, a bunch of people and all the ambitious, talented people will leave, and you'll just be left with whoever is not ambitious or not talented. Right.
Jake, you thought you were sad about space last week.
Well, I mean, this is exactly the question I asked, right? Like, this is the question I asked, but I'm trying to figure out though is where of those problems, are there problems that you just described that are actually solvable at a government level, or should NASA just like be out of that business? Like if they can't compete on salary with Blue Origin and SpaceX and whoever, like should they change something so that the salary is only one part of the equation and the total equation still comes out favorable for an employee? Or should they just be like, let's just shut down JPL and farm everything out, because that is not place we should be? Like that's kind of that's the follow-on question to that, right? Like
Yeah.
is there a scenario
Yeah.
where you could fix everything you just described, right?
It'd be very, very tough. But in contrast, like the value prop at, say, SpaceX is you also don't get paid very much, right? But you do get stock, and you get to work on hardware. And because there's pretty quick turnover there for reasons, all kinds of reasons, like if you're good, you will be promoted pretty quickly. And there's numerous instances of people like basically going up from like entry level shop floor to like leading programs within a couple of years. And you won't have to work with people who are bad at their jobs because they get found out and fired like very, very quickly. So by and large, the workforce there are like dedicated, switched on, smart people like working hard on projects like it actually matters, which is why they were able to deliver the commercial crew like on time and budget, and others less so. How do you fix it? Well, I think it's important to realize that the default outcome, which is don't make any major changes, is that NASA is already out of this business, right? If the business is flying rockets to space and delivering people to space, they're not in that business anymore. They pay SpaceX for a deal, like they pay SpaceX for transport, but like at this rate, it's looking like we'll end up with a lunar base, and NASA will be lucky to have naming rights, right? Like they'll be lucky like to even get like the NASA sticker stuck on the side of a module there. Like, how crazy is that, right? So it's not the case that, oh, Casey, like, what do we do to solve this problem? Like, help things out at NASA. Like, it's already broken, right? It's like in terms of the core functionality of what it's meant to be doing. I went through this list of programs they're working on. I was kind of surprised to find that like there isn't a single program that's not like horribly like on the brink of being cancelled for exceeding its budget and schedule. Like it's vanishingly rare for them to be in. And so how do you fix that? Well, it's really tough. But like if you're not interested in measuring and rewarding productivity, you should not expect to obtain productivity. And if you can't obtain productivity, then you can pack up and go home, because you won't be able to fly stuff in space. It's really hard. I don't know if you've heard.
I was going to bring up, was it last week, Jake? I mentioned that Hera came in like several million euro under, or how much was it, like tens of million euro under their budget, and they
Something like that.
sent it on to some other program. One of the ideas I had last week was like, great, split it up amongst the project team, and they've now profited off of being so efficient. Like maybe that should make a comeback. We've got a little bit of a profit share going on.
I mean, in terms of putting it in their own back pocket, I think that might introduce incentives that might not be conducive to project success. But in terms of giving the people who succeeded in delivering that, under budget, some say in how that money gets spent in the future, that would be a good idea.
Yeah, that was Jake's thing. It was like they get to do a follow-on project that they've been awarded by their
there should be bonus scope in every project that you only get to do with leftover money, right? That's kind of like if you at certain checkpoints along a project, okay, you get to your first review for perseverance, and you've saved whatever $7 million. Okay, well, you get to like spend that on a new development to get a second instrument added to whatever thing you're working on. Like something like that, where
mission, right? Like it's a default
extend
missions, but because we are at that point,
some of that's
cost,
complicated.
we got
right?
a thing to fucking Mars. So like, we've put a piece of metal up there. We're gonna use it.
Like some of that's complicated in terms of like you can't make changes at certain points without going back and redoing other work, and that then incurs more costs. And so like you have to be careful with how that cascades, right? But I still think that there would be a way to like, at certain milestones, like, okay, if here's your budget, and if you come in at 95%, then here's the extra scope you get to do. If you come in at 90%, here's the scope you get to do. Like having something like that laid out so that there is like a path for doing more and being more productive and having that sense of accomplishment. I don't know. It's a thought. I don't know how that ends up being architected at a government level.
Managers.
Yeah.
Right. Like you could take someone who successfully does some project and like pin a medal on them in the White House. Like that'd be a start. But if you look at how this works in private industry, if you start a company and you successfully deliver value, like the upside that accrues to you is insane, right? Like the market says, oh, this is a person who successfully allocated capital very well once. Now they will have like sufficient capital, they can go and do it again and again and again. And sure, sometimes they get lucky once and then they lose it all. But like every now and then someone comes along, and again, like the elephant in the room, like Elon, is like clearly able to build successful technology development programs over and over and over again. And as a result, he's the richest guy on earth. Like that's kind of how, like, we should not be surprised to find that that is the case. I'll put it that way. Yes, but at the same time, like if let's say there's 1,000 program managers across NASA, right? And I walked into HQ tomorrow and I said, print out the list of the 1,000 program managers across NASA and give me their ranking on some quantitative scale for like how successful they are on their programs, like normalized by the difficulty of the program. What a radical idea! What a radical idea that you could even have some idea who's good at their job, and then be like, okay, well let's give these people a 50% pay bump because they're doing well, and then like promote them up and put them on $1 billion project instead of slumming along on a $10 million project waiting for someone to die. But like it's never going to happen, or like I don't see any evidence it's going to happen. And in programs that are growing extremely quickly, so like during the Apollo program, the budget was growing quickly, so there was always scope for like more talented people to kind of work their way up. But as soon as you flatline on budget or whatever, everything gets frozen in place, and that's what we see right now.
Mm-hmm. But so I'll push a little harder on that, because that's the question, right? Like, can you reasonably change that at a government level? I don't know if you can, just because of like, there's going to be no elected officials that are going to be like, yeah, let's have a program that just like fires people at like an Elon Musk level. Like that's just,
right.
it's a third rail for a congressperson. Like, whoever's in charge of the JPL district is not going to like be happy about the idea of like, stack ranking all the employees and cutting the bottom 10%. Like that's not a move you do at a district level. Like, so like,
it's tough.
I guess I always ask this question, like, is it really worth our time to talk about an unreasonable solution, right?
Well, is it unreasonable? Like, it really sucks if you're in the 10% that got cut, right? And quite often it's not because you're just like intrinsically a bad person, right? It's just like wrong place, wrong time, like not well suited to the project at hand. But if you think it sucks to get cut, how bad does it suck to be in the 90% who wouldn't get cut, who has to work with the 10% who should be cut, who has their salary diluted and their achievements diluted and their career wasted by dealing with that time, right? It's super important to like, not let sort of, you kind of have to prune the garden in some ways, right? It's about group care versus individual care. And this is conspicuously obvious to any organization that is like quite obviously succeeding versus organizations that are quite obviously not succeeding. It's a really difficult one in the government because on the government pay scale, there's kind of all sorts of assumptions about stuff. And like the lengths that people go to get rid of people at NASA who are causing problems. I'm not talking about people who are like underperforming or unproductive, but like people who are just giant assholes, who are very, very difficult to work with, who are like abusive to their fellow staff, and you still can't fire them, right? Literally the only thing you can be fired for is like stealing a paperclip. Is instead they'll promote them and then reassign them to Armstrong, right? So like, congratulations, promotion. You've been posted to the Mojave Desert. See you later. And then usually they take the hint and resign.
This is so
isn't that crazy? Isn't that crazy?
This is great.
This is like the Gerst promotion, right? The special advisor or whatever.
Yeah, McAllister now.
Well, you got stuck in a hole.
It's from For All Mankind when they get assigned to Apollo applications, right? And they're like, I'm about to be in fucking Siberia or whatever the line was.
I would jump at that. Like I hitchhiked through Siberia when I was 19. That'd be
I thought you were saying Apollo applications. I don't know. Dude, your blog would have been so good in Apollo applications era. Like that would have been the best shit. Like I've got this crazy set about. You should do a whole series of Apollo applications.
Well, I mean, Nixon gets a bad rap because he tore the Apollo project apart. But like, what was the outcome going to be? Like, we'd won the space race, and the rocket was not that safe, and it was crazy expensive. So we canceled the Saturn V, and then we spent like 8 years developing the space shuttle, which was even more expensive, even less capable, and significantly more dangerous. Then we killed 14 astronauts, so we canceled that, and then we spent 10 years, actually more than that, but we spent 10 years where we didn't have any intervening flight capacity, developing the SLS, which was even more expensive and even more dangerous. Like, this is going in the wrong direction, people. Like, we should probably figure out what we're doing wrong and not do it. Unfortunately, I mean, the weird thing that bothers me, like I've written most of my blogs, actually, for people who don't know them, most of my blogs are like pretty chill. But like I've written a handful which are very critical of the SLS, and I think justifiably so. And the funny thing is I get calls all the time from like NASA insiders or like associated people. I just had like 2 calls this morning with like randoms who wanted to like call me up and take confession, and it's like way worse than I've ever written in my blogs. And there are things I can't write about because I don't have first-hand knowledge, or I don't want to potentially reveal like who told me what. But like all these people, like surprise number of people, are like saying this is messed up, but like clearly within their own organization, they're not authorized to speak their truth, right? They can't admit to themselves and to their bosses and to their employees that like we all know that we're working on a sham project here. Like there's a Russian word for it, a Potemkin, right? It's like it's like a fake project and just spending money and getting nowhere.
I actually, so I think like there's probably people out here that listen to your rants and are like somewhat triggered to some degree of like how intractable some of the problems are in your framing. But I also think that perspective, like you said it, you tried for years to get a green card so that you could work at NASA. That was a thing that your life was formed around in many ways. And so the perspective of getting to that point and then being smacked with a different reality and these problems that you're assessing that have no clear direction on how to fix it or what we should do about it, the frustration there, like if you didn't give a shit, this would be so much easier. If you just went and started your thing and never gave a shit again, right? And just didn't talk about it, never mentioned it,
it's niche.
Let anyone just keep getting their jobs, do their thing, but you never mentioned it. That I feel like you clearly give a shit about it to be so fiery about it. And speaking about it in the way that you are, I think is the only way that anything is potentially changing, of realizing the situation that people are in when they get in that boat. Of if you don't outline it exactly the way that you did, it's easy for every generation to just go like, oh, I guess everything's fine, and it still is the place that I want to spend my entire career, without having actually heard from people that were there and disappointed by it.
Some people are very happy there, and good for them, and I'm happy for them. And a lot of people are doing excellent work that is, gets wasted. It doesn't see the light of day. And in the grand scheme of government waste, the SLS is neither here nor there, right? But like if you look for example, like what Joe Barnard is doing, right? And I just admire him so much because he's living the integrity of like fighting for his dream, and he can't bullshit himself. If he bullshits himself, like his rocket explodes and he wastes months of his life and heaps of money he doesn't really have. And so that's why when he talks about this stuff, you can take him seriously and you can trust him, because he knows that, you can bullshit your way through some parts of life, but when it comes to flying stuff in space, you can't bullshit physics, and you can't bully your way through a physics problem. And now we're still like 20 something years into building the SLS, which is trying to bullshit a physics problem. It's saying it's more important to like actually uncancel the shuttle program. Like all the same people are still working the same jobs, just we're not actually getting anything out of it for 20 years. Then they say, actually the space shuttle itself was a horrible mistake. We should probably backpedal on that a little bit. And like a jobs program is all very well, but it's only a few hundred jobs. Like, why don't we just pay these people like a huge payout to retire, and they can go and spend that money whatever they want, do something productive for the economy, instead of like saying, well, our budget is $1 billion a year to like work on rockets, and 950 million of that is spoken for keeping a bunch of people in make work jobs that aren't actually contributing. And oh shit, now we don't have any actual like rocket capability. It drives me up the wall. And NASA is meant to be an organization that speaks the truth. It's meant to be an organization that studies, science, our origins, the universe we're in. Science is not perfect, but like, if the senior leadership in NASA can't even look themselves in the mirror and say, yeah, something's not right here, we should fix this, right? Can't even admit to themselves. That's a problem. And this is conspicuously obvious at this point, that like none of the people involved who absolutely should have the integrity necessary to say this is a problem are able to say it, are able to fix it, are able to do something about it. They're all just kind of, charitably going through the motions and hoping that it fixes itself. But I think uncharitably, they're on the public purse. My taxes are paying their salary to do a particular job that is regarded as a job that is 100% achievable, right? It's not like we're asking you to do something that might be impossible. It is 100% achievable. They're taking that money to do that job. They're sitting in the chair, occupying the role of the leader of that program. They are showing and fronting it to the public as the person who's responsible for delivering the success of that program. And they know, as well as any of you and I know, that this program is not succeeding and it cannot succeed. And they are content to take that money and lie to us and lie to themselves and waste our time. It's appalling. If you can't do the job, you should resign and do a different job and let someone else who has a chance have a go at it. That's my view on it.
Damn. Yeah. That was a Freaking great ass clip. I felt like I was in a movie for a second, Jake. That shit felt like Aaron Sorkin wrote that rant. That was awesome.
I was like, why
What
is
do we
this
do
such a
about Mars
radical thing to
sampling?
say?
How do we get this goddamn rocks back from Mars? Is what I'm wondering.
Is it moral to take public money to do a job that you can't do? Right? I think it is.
Yeah, so I mean, this is we get into the fundamental challenges of what the government wants to do, right? Because I mean, the joke is that like SLS has a jobs program, so like it is accomplishing what it's meant to do. Like if the objective is employ people in Huntsville, Alabama, the program's doing really well,
Killing it,
right? Like
maybe.
it's
Not
killing
even
it, right?
Not
And
even. If you look at the math, about 25% of the costs are going into salaries, right? 75% is disappearing into overhead. So it's not even a jobs program, right? It's just like a prop up Boeing's bottom line program, and like.
Well, I'm counting those jobs too,
I think
right?
Jake's. Yeah, I think that's the accounting that you're doing.
So
that's not a job in Alabama though. That's not even going to payroll for anyone
wherever,
in the United
right?
States.
But there's if that's the objective, and I know it's not on paper that's the objective, but like everyone kind of knows that's why the legislation was written that way. Like you have to invent a rocket, and the requirement is it's all the exact same rocket parts from all the exact same factories and all the exact same districts as it was for shuttle. Like that's indirectly saying that it's a jobs program, right? And so that's where you get stuck with this.
Yeah,
like,
can I bring up a non-NASA example
issue, right?
real quick? Because everybody in the spirit of hurricanes, everybody is tweeting about this whole FCC subsidy situation that Starlink got snubbed out of all these billions of dollars to do this thing, and they were the only ones to have done it. I'm like, to Casey's point, maybe there was a fucking terrible program, and it's actually incredible that a company did not need any of those billions of dollars to do the thing way sooner, and we should just be happy about that and not have that program anymore. Like maybe maybe it's not, hey, SpaceX should get a bunch of billions of dollars. Maybe we just should stop doing that program and say, well, that one didn't work out. Let's not do that model again because this other organization was way more efficient at it. Instead of trying to say, right the historical wrong and say SpaceX should have been included in this, please mail them their $1.9 billion, or forget how much it was. There's something in that range.
It's all pretty dirty, given that the competing person who managed it. We saw the same sort of things with Blue Origin's intense lobbying effort after HLS, but like, I mean, SpaceX attempts to play within the rules, right? And the rules are 100%.
Well, and those FCC commissioners write like public letters to each other back and forth from vacation all the time, and it's like super weird. And they're having an office battle that is also involving external companies. But my point is, everyone's using it as an example of like Elon Musk's being politically persecuted. When I'm just looking at it like that clearly was a bad program that was never going to achieve the goals that it was meant to achieve. And this other thing exists now, so why don't we stop doing that?
That $900 million was saved because SpaceX just spent it on their own.
That's okay. That's like Black Friday sales math, Jake. That's like I know you used to work in Black Friday sales, but that sounds like some of that. Like you've saved $700. No, you just spent $600 on that TV that you didn't need.
Yeah. I mean, like, imagine if, like, people are proposing to do this, right? At the 11th hour, like, they canceled the commercial crew program and clawed back a bunch of the money that they'd already paid out to SpaceX for that program and said, look, we changed our mind, we're not doing this way. By the way, thank you for building that capsule. I expect you'll offer it to us for $90 million a shot, and if you won't, we'll nationalize your program. Right? That's like, I don't know, it feels kind of sketchy, right? Like, if you're the government and you're like, hey, we're going to pay for a service, you should pay for it. But yeah, I mean, I think, a lot of people in this most recent administration have not gone out of their way to cover themselves with glory as far as their interactions in this area. And I think actually, if you look into the archives, it's kind of been this way for a long, long time. But it just feels dirty to me. Yeah. Like, and in particular on the whole like SpaceX front, like SpaceX is not exactly secret about what their mission is. They just want to have like a relatively smooth regulatory path so they can build giant rockets and then launch all us like quasi-autistic technical weirdos to Mars so we can stop making trouble for everyone here on Earth. And like if I was Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or Trump or someone, I'd just be like, wow, that sounds like a win-win-win situation. Yes, we're going to excise Boca Chica from like federal oversight of all this different stuff. In fact, we'll give you $1 billion a year subsidy to accelerate you like getting out of our hair.
To get all these weirdos out of here.
And instead they're like, let's see if we can slow him down so he has more time to tweet. like, is this a good idea? Like, is this something that anyone actually wants?
Dude, that's 100%. We were talking about this before the show. The FAA like license now seems to be expedited for this next flight, and part of it, I said to Jake, was like, maybe they just FAA was like, I just actually don't have the time to deal with this between now and November, so we're gonna stop everything else for 3 days, do what they want, and then get back to the paperwork that other people are expecting on a slow schedule because we don't have the PR people for this. We don't have the like. That pressure campaign can work because you become such a squeaky wheel that it's so annoying and it grinds the rest of your work to a halt because you have to keep answering reporters' emails and you have to keep responding to people in Congress and you have to keep writing these
You have
letters.
to keep replying to Adrian from NSF.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky situation, right? Because like, the answer will be like, well, the FAA, this office of the FAA is not adequately funded, and which is probably true, and they have a lot of work. At the same time, you kind of have Parkinson's law occurring in real time, right? Like what a coincidence that it turns out that the 200 people in that office working 40 hours a week have exactly 200 times 40 hours worth of work to do every single week, week after week, forever. Like, what a coincidence! And the answer to why that is the case is the same situation we ran up against it at JPL, which is by law there must be 100%, not 99, not 101% full employment at all times, allocated accordingly via all the different accounts, and that's just not how the real world works. And so, yes, of course, the FAA, the Department of Generating Paperwork and the Department of Disposing of Paperwork, and they're both kind of in this battle that will outlast the rest of humanity. I don't have a whole lot of sympathy for them complaining that like it's really hard for them to fix this problem that they created themselves. The writing's been on the wall on this front for years and years and years, and they could quite easily solve these problems in an afternoon if they actually were incentivized or cared enough to do so. That's my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, but I've had the odd tangle with the FAA in the past myself as a private pilot, and I came away with the impression that it was a organization full of well-intentioned people, but like many organizations full of well-intentioned people, their collective outcome was often starkly at odds with their kind of individual desired outcomes. And we're seeing that happen, right? Like where SpaceX is grinding up against this reality of like regulatory incapacity, we actually see like evidence of the problems that are being caused across the entire economy, across our entire civilization. But there it's like, one particular hotspot. And the answer to this is not to like say, oh, well, SpaceX should slow down a bit and chill out. The answer is to say, well, if it's this bad for SpaceX, it's probably just as bad for like 10,000 smaller businesses that can't get off the ground because they can't get the person who's, again, on the public payroll to solve a problem on the phone.
Yeah.
It's crazy. My politics are that SpaceX should, the only law we should pass is that SpaceX has to launch a minimum of 10,000 rockets a year. And if they don't launch that many rockets, then they get severely punished. Like I think that would align the incentives appropriately. But like just to kind of put this in stark relief, it is quite obvious that insufficiently negative or positive consequences occurring to like Project Artemis managers one way or the other. It seems to me that none of the people involved are really all that invested in like humans walking on the moon again anytime soon. I do not think that is the case at the Chinese space program. My impression there is that if you're a program manager who fucks up badly enough, you'll be severely incentivized to not. And that if you succeed, you'll probably be empowered to do more so, particularly given that it's a society where like individualism and expression is kind of curtailed in certain other ways. I think that if we are serious about not kind of watching Chinese flags sprout on the moon and watching Chinese cities on the moon when it's a new moon and it's dark on the face and so on, we should probably get out of our own way and let ourselves succeed on that front.
Damn. Deal with that, Jake.
Solved. We solved it again.
Wait, we should give. We have 1 minute left, so we should obviously have. Casey, you obviously need to plug the business that you're talking about in which you need a typo fixed from somewhere in California.
Well, I have to say that the regulators we work with are generally fine people to work with. And please don't come and crush my business because I said mean things about some other part of the government. For the record, I'm not now nor have I ever been suicidal. But yes, we're building cheap synthetic natural gas from sunlight and air. It's a neat trick on Earth because it solves the climate problem, but it's also necessary on other planets where you need a hydrocarbon supply chain. So that's the reason we're working on it. We're hiring. So if you like the idea of working for a person who's been badly scarred by organizational inefficiency at NASA, come and give us a call.
And which you would
We're
be
mostly hiring mechanical
ruthlessly,
engineers.
read out on a podcast if you ever do anything subpar, I guess. In that way,
You will be stack ranked.
I'm not
and
named names.
fired if you're in the bottom 10%.
No. To be clear, I've not named names, but at the same time, like no recruiting process is perfect, and we've made the odd mistake. And to basically safeguard the effectiveness of the people who work here, we've occasionally asked people to consider finding employment elsewhere. And it's necessary. It's not a dirty thing to say like, hey, you're wasting your time and you're wasting our time. Like you should go and find some other job in this productive economy, right? Like I've been fired. It sucked, but like I'm better now for that than if I'd stayed doing the same thing I was always doing. Like it's just a kind of necessary part of how we make the sausage. So yeah, I feel like this is a good place to work, and the people who work here are generally happy to work here. And we're working on a super crazy, like very ambitious problem. If we succeed, we will cover something like 2% of Earth's land surface with solar panels. So that's a pretty cool trick.
Wow.
That is a pretty cool trick, I would say. Yes.
One weird trick, yeah.
We'll also like make gasoline cheaper and bring back supersonic flight and permanently cut humans' dependence on subsurface like fossil carbon reserves like oil and gas and coal. Solve the climate problem, solve scarcity, basically solve poverty, all in the next generation or so. There's a lot of work to be done, but it has to be done.
Love it.
Fucking nailing it. Yeah.
It's a step on the way.
On
the way to start.
Aaron Sorkin wrote all of the things that you've said on the show today. I am convinced of it.
That is not true. Please do not sue me, Aaron Sorkin. I think it's important to work on this sort of stuff. And I have to say, thanks so much for having me on. I listen to every single one of your shows going back to forever, and it's just been. I feel like the my podcast has come alive and is talking to me, which is weird.
We love it, and
we like making dreams come true.
Dose of realism. I think after
we
our
crush some dreams and make others come true.
Yeah, totally.
Right,
we needed that reset. But Jake, I don't know if we have an announcement for next week yet, but we are once again working on things. So
it's coming.
Stay tuned. Stay tuned is what I'll say. That's all I got. You got anything else?
Go SLS. Woo!
Go SLS. Yes.
I'm wearing my Space Camp shirt today. There we are.
Look at this. Just killing it on the way out. All right, y'all. We will see y'all next week. Bye.
Bye, everybody.